All right, hello everyone. So welcome to chapter 3, Nation and Society. This is a little bit of a longer chapter. Sorry it took me some time to get this video up. I got caught up with grading with my other online class. It's a 4-week course, so we got to work on a faster schedule. So I've been kind of trying to stay locked into getting those assignments graded back to those students. So I apologize. Remember, there's already the quiz that's been posted for this, and I've already posted these slides. This is just going to be a quick wrap up of me kind of going over what I think is the most important things from chapter 3. Now, quick overview of the chapter, some key concepts, okay? Talks about ethnic identity, national identity, citizenship, and patriotism. Your written assignment for this week, the quick write, okay, obviously was asking you guys to figure out which one of these that you actually would consider yourself um do you consider yourself like identifying with the most? Okay. For some of us, it might be ethnicity. For other of us, it might be that national identity because you're proud to be a part of a certain government. And for other of us, it might actually just be that patriotism or citizenship because you are a citizen of a specific nation. Okay. Obviously, for all of us, it's going to be being citizens here in America. Okay. Um, the text then makes a quick little transfer over to talking about conflict. Okay. Most of the conflict that we see throughout the world is going to be ethnic and national conflict. Your textbook then highlights some things such as political attitudes. Okay. And then it starts to talk about not only political attitudes, but also ideology, which is also like a very long chapter to kind of talk about all these things in there. But uh, interesting nonetheless. And it's going to kind of keep us pushing through later chapters where we're going to get into a little bit more detail about some of these things in specific countries. Now, if we look at society, okay, now society, quick definition, terms that refer to a complex human organization, and it's going to be a collection of people that are bound by shared institutions, okay? So we create something here where within, we call what is civil society, and we decide within nature, within that society, how we are going to act amongst each other, what is okay to do, what is not okay to do, and then as a collective group, we decide what is taboo. Okay. Now, um, countries differ with this. There's going to be distinctions between countries that make comparative politics a rich field for us to study. Okay. So what we think is okay in American society might not be okay in Chinese society or German society. Okay. Um, and your textbook goes over various examples of this. Now, ethnic identity, okay, really simple. You guys all know what ethnicity is, okay? It's one of the ways that we are going to identify ourselves, or a simple way for us to identify ourselves, whether that is through language, religion, geography, customs, appearance, or history, okay? And this binds us together. Like, this is where people are able to say, like, we're a group of Italian people, a group of Mexican people, El Salvadorian, Chinese. That ethnicity does link us together in some ways. And obviously, there's going to be a few things out of those that's going to create some solidarity amongst us. Okay. Now, usually within ethnic groups, because I would say, not just look alike, but because we share these things, there's common culture between us. We're more likely to share resources within the group. Okay. And then when it comes to maybe working with some other ethnic groups, we might actually have some differences between them. Okay. And it's worth highlighting this because there's even differences amongst where when we like to cluster people together. So, like, if we were to say Asian people, okay, um, Chinese and Japanese people traditionally don't like each other. Okay, why is that? There are some differences amongst their ethnicities and also some historical conflict. We can even look at Hispanics with when it comes to Mexicans and El Salvadorians. Okay, there's going to be differences between how they identify with one another. They're more willing to work together when it's their own people. When it's outside of that, we're a little bit more hesitant. Okay, now, not always is this tied to political goals, but it can be. Obviously, in countries like America, we are going to be a little bit more diverse in comparison to the rest. Now, national identity. Okay. Now, this is a group that desires self government through an independent state. And then there's some national identity that goes along with it. Okay. So there's institutions that bind people together through common political aspirations. Okay. Obviously, there's going to be a sense of belonging to a nation. It's some of the times going to be inherently political and a basis for nationalism. Now, this nationalism is something that people are going to be prideful for the political destiny that we have. So these are like people that are like prideful of the nation of America within the Constitution. Okay. Now, I think it's kind of interesting what we are seeing going on right now. We are seeing people identify with their home countries or their nations right now in the World Cup. Okay. And I think what's really cool out of all this, we're seeing a blend of not only ethnicity, but also culture being shared. So there's going to be some later examples at the back end of this chapter that we'll look at. So we'll talk about the World Cup. We'll talk about things such as like the UFC fights that just took place in the White House. Okay. It all kind of relates to some of the things that we're talking about in this chapter. Okay. I think these were a couple cool pictures. Okay. We have people in Mexico obviously hyped up in their country for the World Cup, hosting World Cup games. Not only that, um, we have them blending in with the South Korean people. So some of you guys might have seen that on TikTok or any of your social media. The South Koreans and Mexican people have become friends over the past week or so, even though they did play each other last night and Mexico ended up winning that game. It's just really cool to see cultures kind of blend. Obviously, we're going to talk about conflict. It's not always like feel good stories like that, like them, sharing shots of alcohol outside the stadium. We have a Korean guy wearing a sombrero and a mustache. And, a couple years ago, people might see that as racism or him appropriating culture. Uh, a good amount of people that are going to say, hey, it's cool. He's showing appreciation to a culture outside of his. And there's some shared things there. Okay. Another example of this is actually a bad example of what's going on in the World Cup. You had seen one of the Mexican fans kind of squint his eyes, make his eyes look chinky. That's going to be a little bit of, once again, conflict. Um, Another example with the World Cup that we've seen. We actually seen a bunch of Nigerian people supporting the Mexican team because they were playing an African country. Because historically there is some conflict between those groups of people. Okay, now if we keep moving forward, we're going to talk about citizenship and patriotism. And what better way to talk about that than what just took place at the White House this past weekend? Whether you like it or not, okay, let's just look at it this way. Okay, it is a way where people are probably showing pride in one state. Okay, and we do it all the time. Okay, we show pride for most of us during 4th of July. That is when most people are actually proud to be American. Okay, now obviously the definition of citizenship, we are swearing allegiance to a country, and in return you are getting something back from that country. Usually it's going to be basic things such as protection. Okay, now states are going to provide rights to you, and then obviously as a result we do things like pay taxes, submit to military service. That's the trade-off that we're giving there, and it's a lot better for most of us than maybe living a life in the state of nature. Okay, now um obviously with citizenship it can lead to things such as patriotism, pride in one country. I would say maybe patriotism is probably dying in America, but I think it still exists. We get hyped up for the 4th of July. We get excited for the Super Bowl, which I think is an example of us showing being patriotic. Memorial Day, the Olympics. People are proud to be American at that point, and they're repping it. Okay. Obviously, there are times where why is patriotism dying? Patriotism can be dying when there's some type of rift like within a nation. Okay. Obviously, in America right now, the reason why people aren't really too supportive of what happened over the White House in the last week is kind of just the current state. We're at conflict with, Ukraine and Russia, Iran and Israel, and maybe people aren't really too proud to be American in this, like, I would say, state, current day, I should say. Now, what is a nation state? It's a sovereign state, obviously encompassing one dominant nation that claims to embody and represent. Obviously, there's going to be growing ethnic identity tightly connected to the state development. It doesn't always have to be that way. Remember, we can have countries that are diverse. The national identity is going to assert that the state is legitimate because people are pretty much identifying and legitimizing that, hey, this is the government that is in charge, and we are okay with that. Okay. Now, let's keep moving forward. Ethnic and national conflict. Okay, your textbook gives a bunch of great examples of this, like absolutely amazing examples. Now, when it comes to ethnic conflict, obviously it's going to be a conflict between ethnic groups. Um, you can look back. This goes all the way back to like African tribes. Once again, we talked about it: Mexicans versus El Salvadorians, um, Japanese versus Chinese people. Now, your textbook gives a really good example of India. Okay. Now, I want to kind of clear up the definition of this because they're trying to gain control over existing um, institutions like state government to increase power. Okay. So I guess maybe the examples of Mexico and El Salvador maybe aren't the best. So let's just stick with India. Okay. Now, India would be a very good example of this because there's political violence between Hindu and Muslim people. Okay. Over political power, ethnic, and religious lines. Now, another example of that is going to be Kenya and Nigeria. And once again, that is talking about some of those what? Those tribes battling for power within a government, okay, or within a nation state. Now, national conflict is them clashing over each other to form an independent state. So the best example of this is actually the American Revolution. Remember, with the American Revolution, we wanted to separate from the monarchy to create our own nation state. Okay. So this was a national conflict because we were seeking to gain what? Sovereignty from the other side. Another example of this that your textbook goes over is Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union. Okay. Now, political attitudes. Okay. This is just going to describe views in which how maybe like the pace of things should work. Okay. It's four different types: radical, liberal, conservative, and reactionary. Okay. And they all just have a different pace and scope on how we balance things such as freedom versus equality. I should say equality, not quality. Once again, told you I do these one go and that's it. There's going to be mistakes on them. Okay. Now, radicals are going to want dramatic or revolutionary change. They believe the system is broken. They're going to support violence. They want to replace institutions entirely. They want a revolution. You're going to see protests, maybe overthrow a government. Okay. That's what a radical is. Liberal is going to support evolutionary change. They want to work within the system and they believe institutions that are already existed, we can reform them. So we don't have to scrap everything. We just have to make some changes. Okay. And this is going to be something where we prefer gradual process or progress. Conservatives are against major change. Okay. Also, I should probably explain some of the examples that I have here. I know. Oh, actually, here this is the first one we'll explain. Um, they're going to value stability and continuity rather than change. Okay, and it's not that they're against change completely. They would just prefer for it to be slow moving and to be minor changes. Okay, and they believe that some problems might not actually not be solvable. Okay, I put Sandy Cheeks over there because I think she's a very good example of I should have put her on the other slide when we're talking about ideology. She's like the typical example of a conservative person. Okay, obviously conservative. She's not obviously against um, maybe in the terms of maybe adjusting to life. Okay, she's a squirrel, lives above the water, or is supposed to be living above the water and is living down. But she is a perfect example of a person from Texas. So I use her for that. Okay. Because usually we associate what? Conservative people, Republican, you think of Texas, even though um, political parties and ideology and attitudes are all different things. I just thought it's funny to link Sandy Cheeks in there. Okay. Now, reactionaries, okay, they're going to oppose both revolution and evolutionary change. They're going to want to restore past systems. Sometimes they idealize a past that may have never existed. So they want to go back to like the founders thinking of things. And they're going to want to do what? Possibly support violence as well. So sometimes when you look at an ideology spectrum, it's left versus right. And this can be a little bit misleading because radicals and reactionaries actually have some similarities with one another. Okay. They're both going to support dramatic change, but they just want to go in different directions. Reactionaries want to overthrow a system, create an entirely new one. Reactionaries want to go back in time. They want to go back to like the founders, uh, like beliefs of whatever that country was built up upon. And I think a perfect example of this are going to be these fish from the SpongeBob movie. These little racist hillbilly fish living out in the country probably stormed the Capitol on January 6th. I think that would be a very good example of people who are reactionaries. Okay, obviously I could use the people who stormed January 6th, but I think it's just funny to use what? These fish from SpongeBob. Okay, I think it's a kind of a funny analogy. Okay, now political ideologies can be separate. I know you guys have probably gone for ideologies before. The five major ones are going to be liberalism, communism, social democracy, fascism, and anarchism. Okay, remember this is completely different from political attitudes. Okay. So when you're thinking of ideology and you think of conservative and liberal, Try to not get it confused. Attitudes are going to be with the rate of change and the scope of change. Ideology is going to be values and fundamental goals within politics. Okay. First one is going to be liberalism, which prioritizes individual freedom, limited state power, free speech, association markets, and a basis for liberal democracy. Really good example of that is going to be America. Okay. Now, how about with communism? Okay. Communism is going to reject individual freedom and a path to equality. State controls the economy. Remember, the state is going to be in complete control of the economy. Almost there's no separation between state and that free market. The goal obviously here is to eliminate class inequality, strong state autonomy, plus capacity here. Your textbook has a really good graph. I might actually share that with you guys on Canvas. I'll put a picture up of the two tables that I think are really important from this chapter. Now, one thing with communism, I know it sounds crazy. I'm not trying to, push American, democracy onto you guys. It will most likely never work. There have been plenty of examples throughout the world where it has not been successful. Now, I think communism can work in some very specific circumstances. Okay. I think communism can work if you have a group of individuals that are very alike with one another. So they share national identity, they share citizenship, they share a political identity. Okay. Now, if that doesn't exist, it's going to be very hard for them to break up resources evenly amongst each other. I also believe that the group has to be small. So communism will never work in America. We are too big of a country and we are too diverse. You can go and look at books such as Lord of the Flies. Once again, a small group of kids from a private school, all very alike. They crash onto an island and they turn into savages within a couple weeks. And you're supposed to tell me that a place like American can implement this, or even if we look at another country, your textbook highlights the Palestinian people, okay, who have maybe a national and ethnic identity, but they don't have citizenship to claim because they live in an Israeli state or they live in neighboring countries. Now, what if we try to push a communist country within them? They are having ethnic and national conflicts. They wouldn't be able to split things evenly. It just wouldn't work. Okay. Once again, I like SpongeBob, so here's a couple more references. The Pretty Patty episode here on the left, where Patrick is just passing on a bunch of free money. We think everyone's equal. The reality of it is like this Lord of the Flies, the Magic Conch episode, where they're just over in between that seaweed, their society is just right there, and they're going crazy, and they can't break up resources amongst each other, and they're not even there for a day, which is crazy. Now, socialism, it's going to be a mix of liberalism and communism. Um, Markets and private property allowed. Your textbook calls it democratic socialism, and that's what some politicians here in America call it, right? Bernie Sanders identifies as this, and so does AOC. Okay. Obviously, they're going to put more of an emphasis on equality rather than liberalism, and this is something that is very common in Europe, but we do see it making its way in America. Also, I kind of realize that it's probably not the best picture of Bernie Sanders because it's black and white. Maybe it looks like it's like a tribute or something, like he died. So I probably shouldn't put this in the background. I probably should have just put it in the corner or something like that. Now, fascism, okay, they're going to reject freedom and equality. There's a belief in hierarchy here. State expresses national will, anti democratic. Obviously, the big one that's going to get associated in your textbook is going to be Nazi Germany. Once again, I think you should go through your textbook. There's so many good examples of this, like for each individual one, breaking them down. You go into the tables. If you go into those little boxes that say in focus, they do a really good job of going into detail. Obviously, I'm trying to keep this video under like 25 minutes and I need to hurry it up so we can get through there. Now, anarchism, okay, they reject the state entirely, believes freedom and equality is possible without government, that we could just live out in the state of nature amongst each other. It's natural. We would know not to harm one another. We would work together as needed. We don't need government telling us to do that, okay? Now, they oppose private property, and it's something that is never fully implemented, okay? Now, I could show you guys an anarchist example in your guys' textbook, but I thought it would be cool to show you an example of anarchy that's taking place in America right now, okay? So that is in New York. We have a bunch of New York Knicks fans excited that they finally won a championship for the first time in some decades, and it's complete anarchy within the state or within the city, okay? Another example of maybe anarchy, if we're going to make like a cultural or like a reference to something else, would maybe be like Arkham or Gotham, Batman, you know, be another example of anarchism existing within like a specific area. Now, religion, okay, fundamentalism, okay, it's the idea, the ideology that seeks to unite religion with the state or make a faith sovereign authority, which creates a theocracy. Now, your textbook highlights a couple things that are not examples. It highlights Amish people, and the other group of individuals, it is non-Orthodox Jews. Those would not be examples of fundamentalism leading to theocracy. Now, this is the belief that based on failures of ideology, an example of this is usually we're going to see it with like extremist groups. Okay. I don't want to say terrorist groups because extremist groups are usually within a specific religion, but they are just on one side of the spectrum, either on this extreme right or this extreme left. They are nowhere in this middle ground. So we shouldn't actually lump them all together. Yes, they are part of the same religion, but they are extremists. Okay. Examples of this will be the Taliban in Afghanistan or ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Okay? They are groups that are running off of religion. Now, the last thing is going to be political culture. Now, political culture is going to be a concept of institutions that help define society. It's a social roadmap of these norms and priorities, like what we would define is us being American. Okay, so like in America right now, we're seeing Germans and Russians and people of all sorts all around the world visiting America, and they're tripping out on like the Buc-ee's gas station. We have Japanese people saying, trying our barbecue, saying everything is bigger in Texas, and these are like culture defining things to us. Like New York, you think of New York Knicks fans, you're gonna think of a fitted cap and Tim's. Okay, that's part of a piece of culture within America. Okay, you think of Hispanics. We have Hispanics sharing culture with Koreans. The Koreans usually, when they at their venues within their country, they can take in sealed alcohol. They show up to the games here in Mexico. They turn out, oh, we can't bring sealed alcohol in. We got to drink all this alcohol. Well, we have a bunch of tequila. Let's share it with the Mexican fans. So we actually see right now in the World Cup, we see people, our cultures being shared. And of course, you see a bunch of videos of people coming and they're experiencing culture here in America, and they're like, "Hey, the food here is kind of nice. Hey, you guys have AC?" Because remember, people in the UK don't have AC, and they actually, on average, more people die there due to lack of AC than I think people that die here due to gun violence in America, which is actually insane. But every country has like a specific culture defining things on what they think is normal in society and acceptable. Okay? And I just think we've seen some really good examples of the World Cup. And that concludes it. Once again, I'm sorry I got this out a little late to you guys at the back end of the week. Hopefully, you guys are having a good week. You're enjoying things such as, the White House card. The 4th of July is going to be coming up. We have the World Cup going on right now. And we have a lot of interesting things when it comes to ethnic and national conflicts. Okay. We have Moscow being bombed by Ukraine in the last week. We've finally struck a deal with Iran. And even though I don't even want to talk about that, but we're another week down into the summer. Now you guys can hopefully work on your chapter 3 quiz. If you have questions, remember to reach out to me, and I'll see you guys in the chapter 4 video. So you guys have a good rest of your week. Have a good weekend. See you guys next time.